In this video we're looking at DNA fingerprinting, and it's for Biology Unit 2. The idea is that each person has their very own unique DNA, and if everybody has their own unique DNA, you could look at the DNA and you will be able to identify individual people. So this person here has his own DNA, she has her own, he has his own, and so on. There is actually one exception, however, and that is when you look at identical twins. Identical twins have the same DNA because they're made from the same sperm and egg cell, so their DNA is the same. But other than that, everybody else has their own unique DNA, and if you can look at the DNA, you can identify individuals, and we call that DNA fingerprinting. Now, you aren't actually required to know the technique behind how you create the fingerprints, but I'm going to show you a couple of slides next which you might not be able to link to the idea of DNA, so I'm just going to briefly tell you how that actually is done. But we have a sample of DNA taken from a person, so imagine this person, we've taken either some a blood sample or some cells, usually from the inside of the cheek, and that is taken and mixed with some enzymes, and enzymes act like a pair of scissors. Specific enzymes are used there like a pair of scissors, and they cut up the DNA into individual strands or individual little strips, and then samples from this liquid are taken and put into a special kind of gel, into these little wells. And this gel is, if you imagine, it's a bit like jelly. It's like a little slab of jelly. It's got little holes cut in it there, and this solution is taken and put into each one of these gels. We have an electric current put across it, and that will encourage those strips to move. Some strips move further than others based on their size, and then you end up with a genetic fingerprint pattern that looks a bit like this. And you can use these genetic fingerprints for identification purposes and for one or two other things. Now let's have a look at what they might be used for. First one is paternity and maternity, so it could be used to decide or work out who the father and the mother of an individual is if you've got all the DNA samples, but it's also used in criminal identification and in forensics. So for example number 2, let's have a look at how it might happen. Here I've got an example of some various DNA fingerprints. We've got DNA from a crime scene, and this is the pattern that it made on the gel here. We've got 3 suspects, 1, 2 and 3. Which one is the one that was definitely at the crime scene? Well, it's just a case of looking across and matching up the fingerprint. So you can see quite clearly that suspect number 2 has matching DNA fingerprint. Each one of these parts here matches each one of these parts taken from the suspect and taken from the crime scene. So in this case, we would suggest that suspect number 2 was definitely at the crime scene. So here is an example from a paternity set of fingerprints, DNA fingerprints. This is slightly more complicated than the one we looked at previously, but it's worth just having a look through to see how this works. We've got a family with 2 children, one from this marriage and a child from the wife's first marriage. Now, how do we work this out? Well, let's have a look at the DNA patterns, the DNA fingerprints, and how they match. For child number 1, we can see that there is a matching pattern from mum's DNA fingerprint, and if we look at dad's, we can also see there is a matching pattern there as well. These strips line up, so we can say that child number 1 is from this marriage. So we know then that the child number 2 is from the previous marriage, and let's just have a look. If we line up with mum, we've got that one that lines up, that one lines up, that one lines up, and so on, whereas we've got none that line up from the father. Let's use a different color. Okay, so with the father, for child number 2, there's no matching strips there, so we can see that this child actually doesn't come from this father, but the mother's previous marriage. Okay, so that's just an overview of how DNA fingerprinting works, how it can be used to identify individuals for paternity or potentially for crime investigations.